They said it was a routine exit interview. Nothing about it felt routine. The HR director, a woman I'd only met once during onboarding, gave me a smile that hovered somewhere between forced sympathy and careful indifference. "Marcus Trent," she said, like reading my name aloud made it easier to process what they were about to do. I was 30 years old. Systems engineer. Cyber threat mitigation, internal resilience workflows. My job was to make bad things either not happen or not matter when they did. I'd only been at Dynatrium 3 years, but in tech, that's enough time to watch 2 reorgs, 1 acquisition, and 4 managers swirl through your org chart like water down a drain. Still, I didn't see this coming. When I walked into work that morning, I thought the worst thing on my plate would be the deployment delay on the Kestrel update. I'd been up past midnight testing a workaround that ops kept flagging. My inbox was full. The day felt normal. Almost too normal. Then, mid-morning, my access to the internal bug tracker dropped. Credentials revoked. I pinged IT. 10 minutes later, security asked me to step into a side conference room. No explanation. Just a polite escort and a locked badge. That's when I knew. I didn't even get a chance to pull my backup scripts off the sandbox server. They'd frozen me out of every environment except the email they used to terminate me. Effective immediately. 2 words that punch harder than most fists. Azure said it was part of a broader restructuring, but I'd seen the org chart last week. I was the only one reporting to a director whose Slack status still said out sick back Monday. I wasn't naive. Companies don't fire you for what they say. They fire you for what they can say. What really got me, though, was the look on Avery's face when I passed her on the way out. She didn't speak. Just dropped her eyes like we'd never spent 5 months untangling that mess with the telemetry rollout. She knew something. Or maybe she didn't. That's the thing about these places. Everyone's scared to blink wrong. Truth gets traded like contraband. I signed the NDA with a hand that didn't feel like mine. Took the severance folder. The HR director handed me a branded tote bag with my name printed on a farewell card I hadn't read yet. "Good luck," she said. The words were too soft. Too practiced. It wasn't luck I needed. It was answers. And if I couldn't get them now, I'd find them later. Somewhere inside Dynatrium, someone had decided I was expendable. But they'd made a mistake. They thought deleting my credentials would erase me. For the first 3 days, I did what you're supposed to do when you get fired. I updated my awesome. Wrote a blank-faced LinkedIn post about closing one chapter to begin another. Spoke in vagaries. Thanked people I didn't trust. Used words like grateful, resilient, excited for what's next. It was all performance. Underneath, something kept twitching. An itch I couldn't reach. Dynatrium's security culture was airtight, on paper. But anyone who worked in our ops vertical knew the truth. Half of our internal tooling was duct taped together. Legacy dependencies, misaligned configs, invisible admin accounts that survived through pure inertia. It was a spider web. And I'd spent the last year untangling it thread by thread. I didn't make enemies. I made systems work. Quietly. Efficiently. So why now? Why me? It kept circling back to the Kestrel update. That rollout had been red flagged in the audit last quarter, too much sensitive data crossing unsecured endpoints. I raised the issue in 3 sprint retros, filed a redline summary, even brought it up in the director's sync. I thought I was being diligent. In hindsight, I was waving a red flag in front of a bull. Someone didn't want that issue surfacing. Not before launch. Not when we were being courted by Finex Capital for a funding round that required clean compliance posture. Their words. I wasn't stupid. I'd seen what happened to people who raised the wrong concerns at the wrong time. Usually, they were just ignored. But I had a different kind of profile. Internal access. Admin rights. Audit trail visibility. I could prove things. Or I could have, before they shut me out. But they hadn't shut me out completely. The Sandbox VM on my personal laptop, isolated but sync-capable, still had a stale pull of our pre-release debug logs. Nothing top secret. Nothing client-facing. But enough to show packet inspection discrepancies in the telemetry layer. Enough to raise questions. The kind no one wants to answer when millions are on the line. I emailed myself a few snapshots. Just timestamps and hashed strings, evidence of anomalies, not accusations. I didn't know what I was looking for yet. That night, a blocked number called 3 times and left no message. At 2:14 a.m., I got a password reset notification for my dormant company email. That shouldn't be possible. They deactivated it. Or so I thought. I spun up the VM again. Ran a diagnostic on the local logging tool. It had pinged outbound during the reset attempt, routing through a DNS that didn't belong to Dynatrium. That's when it hit me. Someone wasn't just trying to bury my access. They were using it. Spoofing my credentials. Reconstructing access paths under my name, paths that were supposed to be terminated. This wasn't just about getting rid of me. This was about using me. Or at least the shadow of me. And if that was true, someone inside Dynatrium was building a backdoor. With my fingerprints on the latch. The next morning, I drove out to a coffee shop near the water, one of those anonymous places with loud music, cheap espresso, and no one who cared if you sat with a laptop for hours. I needed air. Noise. Something to keep the paranoia from blooming into full panic. I wasn't paranoid yet. Not quite. But I knew the feeling. I'd worked in threat detection long enough to recognize the signs. The quiet ones. The ones that didn't show up in audits. Log tampering. Credential spoofing. Recon masking as cleanup. This wasn't clumsy. It was surgical. Which meant someone inside Dynatrium was doing it. I pulled up the old logs again. Dug deeper. One of the hash trails I'd flagged the night before showed a rare process tree, an unusual access pattern I hadn't seen in over a year. Recursive pulls from the Kestrel staging repo rerouted through our deprecated test environment. That repo should have been quarantined 2 months ago when we migrated everything to the new CI pipeline. But someone had reactivated it. And the identity token used for the reactivation was mine. Except it wasn't. The metadata showed a session origin from a subnet block located in Redmond, not Seattle. That narrowed the suspect pool considerably. We had only 2 employees operating from that region, one of them in marketing, and the other. No, it couldn't be. Jason Ng. Senior DevSecOps engineer. Smart. Cautious. Ex-military. We'd worked together on the Kestrel build-out. I respected him. Hell, I'd even covered for him last fall when he missed a patch deadline due to a family emergency. I didn't want to believe it. But his fingerprints were in the staging environment 2 days before my termination, on the same files that were now showing access under my revoked credentials. I cross-referenced the logs with a side-channel monitoring script I'd written months ago. A crude, unofficial watchdog that pinged me anytime unusual config diffs occurred in restricted zones. Jason's name popped up twice. Once during the night shift. Once at 3:11 a.m., 2 hours before my account triggered that mysterious password reset. I closed the laptop. My palms were sweating. If Jason was forging access through my identity, he wasn't acting alone. It would take 2 people to override the deactivation order, 1 in infrastructure, 1 in HR. Maybe more. A compartmentalized operation. Controlled. Disguised as routine dev work. But why? What was worth the risk? That's when I remembered something buried deep in the last Q4 compliance memo, an innocuous phrase at the end of a long thread about data replication. Kestrel's telemetry module will retain behavioral event data in accordance with regional retention policies, except we hadn't finalized those policies yet, which meant someone was pushing live behavioral tracking into production before legal sign-off, before user consent, and before compliance could certify the data boundaries. They weren't fixing Kestrel. They were weaponizing it. and they needed me out of the picture because I was the only one who still knew how the telemetry backbone had been wired. If I was right, this wasn't just a policy violation. It was illegal. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the floor of my apartment, laptop open on the coffee table, staring at lines of code I knew like the back of my hand. My old Kestrel module, rewritten, repackaged, but not entirely erased. I could see the seams. The signature of my original work buried beneath someone else's patch job. They hadn't rebuilt it. They'd repurposed it. Back then, Kestrel was just a telemetry layer used for performance metrics, crash reports, generic usage analytics. Nothing invasive. It was intentionally designed not to record user identities or behavioral fingerprints. We kept it clean because we had to. Finance clients. Legal exposure. Audit trails. Now, the updated module was routing behavioral events into a shadow data lake, one not referenced in any official documentation. It included page views, input behavior, error triggers, even mouse tracking patterns. Identifiable behavioral signatures. Which meant one thing: they were building user profiles without consent. Data collection at that scale, with that granularity, required multiple approvals: legal, compliance, executive. I'd seen no mention of it in any of the documentation I reviewed prior to my termination. Nothing in Jira. Nothing in Confluence. Nothing in the Sprint retros. Which meant this wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. And they needed someone to blame if it ever came to light. Me. I tried calling Jason. Straight to voicemail. I tried his personal email. No response. Then I pinged someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Naomi Sink, former Dynatrium QA lead. She left the company last quarter, burned out, disillusioned, and if I remembered correctly, skeptical of Kestrel's new direction. She picked up on the third ring. "You're calling me at 2 a.m. This has to be either about guilt or a lawsuit." "Neither," I said. "But probably both, eventually." I laid it out. Not everything, just enough to make her pause. A long silence. Then, I saw the same packet trail during our final regression run. I flagged it. Twice. They told me it was a test artifact. It wasn't. "I know," she said. That's when I knew I had to leave. She sounded tired. Not scared, just done. The kind of tired you can't sleep off. "There's more," I said. "They're using my credentials to pull it off. Framing it like I built the whole thing. That I pushed it into prod." Naomi swore under her breath. "They fired the one guy who could prove it wasn't him," she said. "And now they're running your code to do what you explicitly said we shouldn't do." That's the gist. I kept a snapshot, she added. One of the test builds. It's dirty, stripped down version, partial configs, but it proves the data trail exists. My throat went dry. "Can you send it?" "No. But I can show you in person." There was a beat of hesitation before she added, "Meet me tomorrow, 9 p.m. Magnuson Park. Don't bring your phone." Magnuson Park was empty that time of night. The air was wet with the smell of lake water and rusted playground steel. Sodium lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. I left my phone powered off in the glove box and walked toward the old hangars, past the field where startups used to hold company picnics back when we still pretended culture mattered. Naomi was already there. Hoodie up. Arms crossed. Eyes scanning the dark like she'd done this before. She nodded once. "You weren't followed. You checked?" "I always check." She led me to a bench near the service lot. Between us, she set down an old Lenovo laptop. No stickers. No identifiers. Just black plastic and war stories. "This machine's air-gapped," she said. Pulled the network card. "It's clean. Booted into a Linux distro I built from scratch. No persistence. No logs. No trace." She wasn't kidding. When the desktop flickered to life, she opened a folder labeled simply Shadow Glass. Inside were 4 files: a scrubbed Kestrel build, a partial network diagram, a debug trace, and a compressed archive labeled Mirror's Lake, TS-GZ. I didn't ask. I knew what it was. Proof. Telemetry payloads are being rerouted, she said, pulling up the diagram. You see this node? It's a proxy tunnel, encoded, masked to look like a CDN cache. But the destination IP doesn't belong to Dynatrium or any of its partners. It's registered to a holding company in Delaware, one with no website, no listed employees. Shell entity, I said quietly. Yup. And the data? Unfiltered, she said. User behavior, financial habits, location data. They're not just analyzing it, they're monetizing it, selling it off platform. That's why they needed your codebase. Your telemetry layer doesn't trigger the compliance flags. It runs silent. I stared at the screen. Kestrel wasn't just a telemetry module anymore. It was a surveillance engine. And they'd pinned it all on me. If I leak this, I said, they'll claim it's stolen code. They'll bury me under lawsuits. Say I'm a disgruntled ex-employee out for revenge. Which is why you don't leak it, she said. Not yet. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. This is for your protection. Chain of custody. You're not blowing a whistle. You're building a case. You keep this. You get a lawyer. And you sit on it until they make the next move. I hesitated. She pushed the drive into my hand. I've already got an exit plan, she said. But you? You're still in the blast zone. Her voice softened. They think you're gone. They think you've accepted it. Don't let them be right. I pocketed the drive. For the first time in days, the fear didn't feel like drowning. It felt like fuel. The waiting was the hardest part. In the days that followed, I didn't try to clear my name, not publicly. Not yet. Instead, I went quiet. Let them believe I was just another tech casualty, cut loose, scrambling to find my next paycheck. I kept my movements tight. No posts. No leaks. Just research. Naomi had been right. This wasn't just about violating compliance or abusing telemetry. This was fraud on a scale I hadn't fully grasped. By cross-referencing public investment reports and internal architecture files, I found the link. Viridian Partners, a private equity firm with a controlling stake in Dynatrium. And quietly, also behind a handful of obscure data brokers operating out of low-regulation territories. The telemetry data wasn't just being sold, it was being bundled, cross-matched, and then used to train behavioral prediction models for credit risk scoring, insurance pricing, even pre-employment filtering. All without user knowledge. All traceable back to my stolen code. They'd built a digital mirror of every user who touched Kestrel, and they'd signed my name to the blueprint. I retained a lawyer. Not a big firm. A data ethics specialist who'd left corporate law after watching too many companies walk away clean. We didn't go public. We went to regulators. Quiet meetings. Controlled disclosures. Chain of custody documentation. Naomi's archive. My logs. Dates, times, hashes. Every breadcrumb accounted for. We built a timeline that was airtight. And then we waited. 3 weeks later, Dynatrium's name hit the wire, not through me. A leaked DOJ investigation into unauthorized behavioral data mining. The story broke on a Sunday. By Monday morning, their stock had cratered. Investors panicked. The CTO resigned to pursue other opportunities. A compliance officer was quietly escorted out. Jason? He'd been offered immunity in exchange for internal testimony. I wasn't surprised. He'd always been careful. He knew when to jump ship. But I wasn't there for revenge. I didn't care about headlines. I just wanted the truth on record. The HR director who'd escorted me out 6 weeks ago called on a Thursday. Soft voice. Awkward tone. Said the board wanted to rectify the situation. said I could return under a new title with back pay and a revised reporting structure. I let her finish. Then I said no. I wasn't coming back. Not to a place that discarded me the second I became inconvenient. Not to a company where my silence was more valuable than my integrity. I wasn't angry anymore. Just clear. Naomi relocated to Berlin. I heard she's consulting for a non-profit watchdog group. I took some time off, bought a used truck, drove north into the quieter parts of Washington where the signal's low and the trees don't ask questions. I still check the logs sometimes. Still run the scripts. Just in case. Because some part of me still believes in what we were trying to build. Not what it became, but what it could have been.